I'm going to give just a little bit of an introduction, and then I'll probably have an opportunity to get back up here after Matt's comments, talk about some of the things we're doing here in the region related to energy. But our featured guest this morning, it's my pleasure to introduce him. He serves as the Vice President at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Institute for 21st Century Energy. Of course, they're going to be talking about the Partnership to Fuel America this morning. The mission of the Institute is to unify policymakers, regulators, business leaders, and the American public behind a common sense energy strategy to help keep America secure, prosperous, and clean. Matt is responsible for leading the Institute's efforts to promote and expand support for the development of Canadian oil sands and access to Arctic resources. Prior to serving at the Chamber, he served in several notable capacities and organizations, including the American Petroleum Institute, the White House Office of Cabinet Affairs in the George W. Bush administration, and in the U.S. Department of Energy. He also worked for 2 members of the U.S. House of Representatives in the New York State Assembly and for the Texas Office of State Federal Relations in Washington, D.C. In addition, he has extensive political experience in local, state, and federal campaigns and with national conventions. Matt and other members of his team, many of you are familiar with because they've been out here before, and they've been to the Black Hills several times. We're pleased to have them out again this week. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Matt Cook.
Thank you. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. This is my 3rd time to Rapid City in about a year, a little less than a year. I'm always happy to come out here. It's a beautiful area, and you guys dialed up some nice weather for me, which I appreciate. We're going to deal with some technical issues here. They need to have a clicker that works, so Tony's going to help put the slide. But I just wanted to go through a few things briefly. I wanted to provide you a little more information for those of you who aren't familiar with the Partnership to Fuel America and with the Energy Institute. I'll give a little background on that. And some, bear with me, I know you've heard it before, but Ben covered just a little bit of a general overview of what Partnership's about. But then I'd like to just give you an update on what's going on with the Partnership, provide you a little more background on what the status is on the Keystone XL pipeline, then turn it over to Ben and to Chuck Loomis to talk a little bit more about some other energy issues, in particular that are of interest to this area. There's an oil and gas symposium going on today. There's been a lot of interest in what's happening in energy development in many of the states around you and what it means to South Dakota, and I think it's important that we highlight some of those issues. And also then we've had a lot of questions along the way about what's happening with energy, electricity generation in particular. And I thought it would be good for Chuck to give a little update on how they see the world and what's happening in the power generation side of things. So as we continue to move forward, and we like to come back here every 6 months or so, we'd like to keep providing you some more information, more background on issues. But in addition, along the way, we're going to keep sending you information for those of you who sign up and try to provide you with status and updates on what's happening in Washington, what's happening in the national discussions on energy policy. So just briefly, the Partnership to Fuel America is an organization that the U.S. Chamber put together. Starting last year, I came over to the Chamber to help head this effort. And well, we had recognized that we needed to get out and talk to people and find a way to provide small businesses with a network and an opportunity to learn more about energy issues and become better energy advocates. There's this great desire, like here, for people around the country and small businesses to get more information about what's happening in Marcellus Shale, what's happening in Canada, why is Canada important, why is this pipeline important, why is what's happening up in Bakken. So we found that there was people who ought to be informed and engaged and who wanted to be informed and engaged, that we needed to find a way to help them do that. So we built this network and we felt we could be a resource at the Chamber. We could provide you with some information about the Canadian oil sands, about why Canada is important to our energy development here in the United States, why it's important to our economy. And we can also be that resource to help keep, as I mentioned, keep you aware of what's happening on the national energy policy issues. So we've been around here, as I mentioned, and started recruiting in 11 states. We've identified a number of businesses in each state and business organizations. We feel that it covers a breadth of different companies, and not only in all different sectors. Some of those have an active hand in energy, some as we've talked about here today, who are, whether they're insurers or bankers or accountants who are interested in what's happening in the energy sector because the clients or the potential for business opportunity there as well. But also, just broadly, we're running a lot of business and business organizations from everywhere from Indiana all the way through to Montana that are just interested in wanting to know what's happening in this country because of energy security and the need for developing more energy and our need for energy in this country and help boost our economy going forward. So, where are we? I'm sorry, was a prior slide? Yeah, I want to just talk about oil sands benefits just for a minute. As you know, and as we as you may know, about 3 or 4 years ago, no one ever heard of Canadian oil sands. People wouldn't have been talking about it, but what's happened with this Keystone XL pipeline, what we feel is an unfortunate circumstance that it hasn't been built yet, has also elevated this issue into the national conscious and much more of a national conversation. For every barrel of oil we import from Canada, we don't have to import one from some other country somewhere else in the world. We have a very good relationship with a trade partner with Canada, and we feel that there's a tremendous benefit for not only bringing the oil down to Keystone XL, but also this oil sands development has been a big boon to our economy here in the United States. We've been able to identify about almost 2,000 companies in 49 states that employ almost 80,000 people that have something to do with oil sands development in Canada. They're shipping some sort of a computer part, their coveralls, gloves, Caterpillar trucks, all sorts of goods and equipment up to Canada right now. And as the potential for those imports to increase, as it says at the bottom, we could see potential for greater benefit for our economy as well. I'm sorry, so now we can go forward. Talk about 11 states. One more. Our partners have spanned abroad with the people, as I mentioned, from different organizations. We've grown from, we initiated with about 140 members last fall. We're up to almost 290, which we feel covers hundreds of thousands of people if you start looking into all the different organizations. And we have the chambers, like Linda would say, at state and local chambers. We have a lot of other economic development organizations. We have a lot of companies, hospitality organizations, innkeepers, all their employees. And we start to recognize that there's quite a few people who are interested, and the breadth of this organization covers a lot more than just 289 different organizations. But we're going to continue to try to grow it. We have called on a number of you to help out along the way, and we appreciate the help. There was 4 people, including Ben, who testified at hearings last fall when the State Department came through the area to hold hearings on Keystone XL. We also had John Meyer from Winter, who came down to Washington to testify at Senate Labor Committee hearing about the benefits and potential benefits of the Keystone XL pipeline to his county, to his community. And so we felt that was beneficial. So along the way, we're going to continue to try to communicate to you, try to provide you with opportunities to speak out and to engage. We've had on our website, we've provided people opportunities to sign petitions to the White House. We've also tried to keep you informed on whether there's opportunities to send letters into the State Department during the hearing process, or as well as different people have been engaged in sending in letters to the editor and other sorts of comments to state and local newspapers as well. Can you go to the Keystone map? So just a brief update. As you know, this was a no-brainer. As I mentioned, there was a lot of economic benefit when the Chamber recognized that this was something that we had to get behind and support. There's been a lot of other pipelines built across from Canada to the United States, including one that was permitted at the beginning of this administration. This pipeline's been held up in politics, but we felt we needed to really get behind it. It's a $7 billion investment that would potentially employ 13,000 people in construction and manufacturing, and potentially 7,000 to 8,000 more residual beneficial jobs that spill over from the economic activity going on in those states. Just this past, so in last fall, the president had announced he was going to delay the pipeline until after the elections and into the spring of 2013. Congress was not happy with that, so they passed legislation that stated that the president would have to, excuse me, either agree to make a decision one way or the other on the pipeline, or if he didn't make a decision, that he would force his hand and would just become law and the permit would be granted. So in January, the president declined the pipeline. He said there was issues that needed to be resolved in Nebraska. And so he denied the application. So the next one. So in February, TransCanada announced it was going to start to do that lower section of the pipeline. It didn't need a presidential permit, but they wanted to start building that and move forward on the part from Cushing, Oklahoma, down to Texas. There's a lot of oil, domestic oil, is what I'm talking about with Canadian oil. There's a lot of domestic oil that could benefit from this pipeline, not only in Oklahoma, but as well as on-ramps are being built in areas up near the eastern Montana, the portions that are going to allow some of that Bakken crude to get on that pipeline as well. So TransCanada announced they were going to move forward, and they've just begun construction this past summer. They had to get a few permits lined up and working with the Army Corps of Engineers and EPA, so that started to move forward. So then subsequently in May, TransCanada announced they're going to reapply to try to get this presidential permit to build the rest of that pipeline down from Alberta as far as into Nebraska. Nebraska's state government had passed legislation allowing them to build a structure in order to try to identify and figure out the best route through and around, potentially around some of the environmentally sensitive areas they were concerned about. And at this point, it seems like it's resolved. Just in September, just a few weeks ago, earlier this month, TransCanada has submitted its preferred route to the state of Nebraska. Nebraska now is reviewing that. The Department of Environmental Quality will then make a recommendation to their governor, who will then put forward a recommendation to the president. We're expecting that sometime this fall. The governor's office, once it receives it from the DEQ, has 30 days in which to review and make a decision. We're still pushing and promoting that the president should make a decision as quickly as possible. We still don't expect anything until spring of next year. In fact, you can go to the next slide. In fact, we're getting a little more concerned about what we're starting to see. And some of the information that's coming out from the State Department, from the White House, they recently asked for comment on what the scope of the new EIS should be. The environmental impact statement had been reviewed. They took 3.5 years to review this project. Back in August of last year, the final environmental impact statement had said that it was the lowest risk possible. In fact, that using the pipeline was lower risk than not building a pipeline in order to get this crude in this country. And we feel that it doesn't need extensive review doesn't need to happen beyond the portion of what's the new portion of Nebraska. It's been reviewed exhaustively. There's been some recent indications and some requests for comment from the State Department that indicate that they're willing to maybe open up the comments to other issues. They've asked for if there's some other environmental issues that they should be reviewing and considering. And so for us, we read that as being one more opportunity for them to delay this even further, or looking for opportunities to need to delay it if they want to. Excuse me. So that's the status of the pipeline. We're going to continue to try to promote that it gets built. The economic benefits to this country are tremendous, but more importantly, it's the signal that you're saying to the American countries and the private investors who want to come in and build jobs, excuse me, who need to build infrastructure and who need to build big projects, that you can go somewhere else to do your business. It's going to get hard to make your investments. We've been trying to examine this at the Chamber for a while. We've had a number of different studies, including one, if you want to look up, called Project No Project, that looked at what projects were being delayed in the environment and the energy sector, identified 350 projects that had been delayed, or stalled, or postponed, or just stopped over the last number of years, that primarily due to what we call green tape, over-regulation, EPA regulations, tier regulations, the different layers of regulations that you have to do in order to get projects built. There was a tune of about $1.1 trillion of investment, and interestingly, about 45% of those projects were green energy projects, either wind power or solar power or other sorts of, and not including hydro. We don't consider that anything anymore. They don't want to talk about that being green. They can't build a hydro project anyway. But so we're going to continue to talk about the need to build this infrastructure, the need to try to continue to make investments in this country. We feel we're going to continue to back Keystone. We're going to continue to back the importance of this relationship with Canada, and we're going to continue to promote the need for energy security. So I'll turn it over to Ben, because I think this might be a nice segue to talk about what you guys are seeing here and some of your the interest in this area. But You know, last time I was here, we talked a little more about coal, and I'd be happy to come back next time in the spring, perhaps. And if you guys have some subjects that you'd like to cover, but we'd like to continue to try to bring this information to you. And if you do decide to join the partnership, if you haven't already, we're not a heavy hand. We send you some information every few weeks or so, just try to provide you with some update on what's happening in the national landscape, or what you might be hearing about on energy development, or some sorts of things in some other sectors, or what some of these steps along the way have been happening on the Keystone XL. And the requests are the same, and there's no cost to you, and we're not going to put your name on anything without asking. We just will simply ask if you sign up that you won't receive our information if you post your name on our website. But hopefully that you become more engaged and more active and more interested in energy issues along the way. Just as importantly, spreading them out with your employees, and talking to other folks at other meetings and other organizations, and whether it's at the Chamber or the Economic Development Organization, or whether it's at Kiwanis or whatever, even at church over cocktails in your neighborhood. I'm hoping that you continue to try to talk about the need for some common sense energy policy in this country. So, Ben, if you would, please, sir.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, there are some churches that don't serve cocktails.
I'm Catholic, so
Well, I appreciate this opportunity. There is a conference happening right now in Rapid City. It's the 8th annual oil and gas, they call it New Horizons Oil and Gas Conference, happening over at the School of Mines. It started actually yesterday with a host of field trips, and it will conclude this Wednesday with a bunch more field trips. But the meat of the program is going to be happening today and tomorrow. And we were delighted to work with the School of Mines in partnership. In the past, they really haven't taken an economic development or economic impact focus to this conference. But I was pleased that in our efforts to work with the School of Mines, they offered up an afternoon session, which will happen this afternoon, and put together, I think, a pretty good panel to talk about the impact of energy development. And so we're pleased to have Matt and his group out here representing really an international and national perspective on energy policy. And I've heard folks from their organization deliver comments about the need for a national energy policy, because we really haven't had that. And for those of you who have not spent a lot of time on these guys' website, I would encourage you to do so. It is very objectively delivered. Of course, it's pro-business, so we wouldn't expect anything less from the Chamber, but I have to say that the style and the way in which they deliver the message is very credible, and it covers all facets of energy. It does talk about renewables, it does talk about extractives, it talks about nuclear, it talks about all of them. And so what I think is important is that all of us just become more informed. Why? Because anytime we're in a community and we start getting pushback on energy and what kind of policies we ought to have, we just need to be the smartest people there to inform people of what's really going on, because that gives us the power then to start getting the public aware of what's at stake when we're talking about energy, and kind of cut through all the myths and just look at the economics, determine which forms of energy are the most economical, which ones are going to deliver stuff at the lowest cost for the consumer, and that's where I think that this Energy Institute really shines. So I would encourage everyone to take some time. This conference over at the School of Mines is really focused on, if you look at the 32-page, I think it is, agenda, your eyes will glaze over after about page 1, because it really has a focus on, this is the American Institute for Professional Geologists conference. It's really being paired together with the School of Mines. This is the 8th annual New Horizons Oil and Gas Conference. And so it does have definitely an academic focus and understanding the geology of what's going on. And if you can imagine where Williston is, or the Bakken, and envision this giant bowl, you know, everyone's always asking us, when are we going to get the development, when are we going to get the exploration and production happening in South Dakota? And I always just push people off on that aspect of it and say, right now, their hit rates on those wells up in North Dakota are darn near 100%. So there's really no motivation for them to do a lot of crazy exploration down in South Dakota, at least in the short term, because everything they're hitting up there is just gold. So I don't expect a lot of that to happen. However, it's important to know that that energy development up there is already impacting us in many positive ways. Not only are we providing that supply chain, We're seeing a couple of pipe manufacturers, for example, many of you may have read about in the newspaper, one up in Belfouche, one in Rapid City, that purports to provide pipe to that area. And we have the ability for same-day repair, machining of parts that can be delivered to that area. We've got a cement plant that is providing products to that. So there's all sorts of opportunities for us to take advantage of. There's a housing shortage, we know that. We have a lot of housing goods and products that we can be sending up there. The money they're making up there is crazy money. So they have to deploy that money someplace. And if they're in business, they want to deploy it growing their business. And if they're just wanting to goof off on the weekend, they'll come down to Deadwood. And we're already seeing a lot of that. In fact, there's tour buses that are set up to create a little shuttle from that money up there to the Black Hills from a tourism standpoint. So I hope everyone can see that this is something we ought to be caring about. When we identified 6 industries that we as a region were going to be focusing on, extractive energy was one of those 6. And one of the litmus tests we applied was, what are the average wages in each of these sectors, and how do those average wages compare to what our average wage is in the Black Hills? The 6 industries combined are about 40% higher than what our average wage is. So every new job we get in one of those 6 clusters is a big success for us. Energy, when you just carve that one off, is nearly 70% higher. So it's just a winner all the way around. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about before we give some time to Black Hills Power. And that is, there is a summit happening down in Denver next month. It's probably too late for anyone to register, but I am going to attend this summit. And it's called the 3rd Annual Bakken Infrastructure Finance and Development Summit. And this thing has been gaining steam for the last 2 years, and they have it down in Denver. And there's a lot of opportunities for us to get on the radar screens for a lot of these companies. So essentially, I'm going down there to get a little bit smarter about it. But secondly, there's an opportunity to start generating some prospect leads from that, to let them know that the Black Hills cares about this industry, and we stand ready to support that. And there is going to be a featured case study at this conference in Denver that's entitled Untapped Potential in South Dakota. And just a little bit of playing with, could South Dakota have a, on the horizon, could we have a play in shale? So a couple of things going on. One other thing I wanted to mention before I give up the microphone, and that is, how many of you are familiar with the Ports to Plains Alliance? At least have heard of that. For those of you who have not heard of that, you can go in and you can find them online. The Ports to Plains Alliance is an effort that connects Canada to Mexico, and it connects them via transportation. That's the primary purpose of the Ports to Plains Alliance. And there's 3 facets that we benefit from if we have better north-south infrastructure. We know that the I-29 corridor is huge, from Kansas City all the way up to Winnipeg. Every one of those cities over there has a major north-south, east-west connection. We don't have that, not yet. The Ports to Plains helps us to sort of fill that gap in our infrastructure. Because I-90 is great, we've got the east-west there. But where it comes to a north-south, we don't have an interstate that connects into Rapid City. That's a weakness for us. So the Ports to Plains Alliance seeks to develop a 4-lane divided highway from Mexico to Canada. And the 3 areas that stand to benefit from that are tourism, agriculture, and you guessed it, energy. So become more familiar with the Ports to Plains Alliance if you're not. It's a great organization. The region here, through Black Hills Vision, is one of the top level investors in the Ports to Plains Alliance to lobby for support. We'll send someone back to DC at least once a year to lobby on behalf of transportation funding to develop that north-south highway. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to, I believe, Chuck Loomis with Black Hills. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben, and Matt, thank you for being here and inviting us to make a few comments as well. As all of you know, Black Hills Power has served the region with low-cost, safe, reliable energy since the 1880s, nearly 130 years now. And our customers have benefited from a low-cost, stable resource, coal. I think that the insert in your pamphlet that speaks about barriers affecting energy development sums it up quite well in terms of some of the challenges that we face. On the right-hand side, it says new energy regulations equal higher prices and job losses. Despite the fact that coal is the largest source of electricity in America, new regulations have forced coal-fired power plants to either make expensive modifications or close their doors. And that's one of the things that Black Hills Power has been challenged with over the past 2 years. Most recently, we completed our Wygen 3 power plant, a coal-fired baseload plant in Gillette, Wyoming. It was placed into service in April 2010. Our customers will benefit from that stable, low-cost power for the next 40 to 50 years. In early of 2011, the first in a series of rules issued by the EPA have identified challenges for us. These are the first series of rules is called the Boiler MACT rules, and MACT is M-A-C-T, stands for Maximum Available Control Technology. These rules set new emissions limits for small coal-fired plants. A very short compliance window was put in place by the EPA. We must comply with these new emissions limits by March of 2014. For Black Hills Power, we have 3 plants impacted. Our Ben French plant here in Rapid City, the Osage, Wyoming plant, and our Neil Simpson 1 power plant near Gillette. The Osage plant was put into service in 1950, Ben French in 1959, and Neil Simpson 1 in the late 60s. So we're faced with a difficult choice of whether to invest heavily in new equipment to modify the plants and reduce emissions, or to retire the plants and build new replacement generation. Given the age of the plant and the plants and the cost associated with bringing them into compliance, we made the decision after analysis last summer to retire those 3 plants in March of 2014 and build new replacement generation. That starts the process called integrated resource planning. Integrated resource plans determine the most cost-effective way, most cost-effective source of new power to replace those 3 plants. And in the fall, we completed that IRP and determined that a new natural gas combined cycle plant would be the most cost-effective option for Black Hills Power. At the same time, our Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power Utility, sister utility of Black Hills Power, was looking to build a new plant as well to serve the growing demand in and around the Cheyenne area. Cheyenne is seeing a fair amount of growth. Just as Ben has identified, they have both east-west and north-south interstates with I-25 and Interstate 80. We filed for a certificate of public convenience and necessity with the Wyoming Public Service Commission on November 1st, 2011, to build a jointly owned combined cycle natural gas plant. Really a win-win for our customers and Cheyenne's customers, for Black Hills Power and the Cheyenne utility to share in the fixed costs of building the plant. We went through the regulatory approval process, and on July 31st of this year, received the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity from the Wyoming Public Service Commission, and we plan to begin construction of the Cheyenne Prairie Generating Station in the spring of 2013 and bring it online in 2014. The total cost of this plant will be about $222 million, Black Hills Power's share of the plan will be in the range of $90 million. We're currently working on rate planning associated with this that will have an impact on customers. We're trying to develop what we call a phase-in plan that will allow us to phase in the costs over 2013, 14, and possibly 2015 as well. So that's a quick update on the outlook for power production. If I can leave you with a positive note, the most substantial portion of our generation is provided by low-cost, stable-priced coal generation resources. And around the Midwest, utilities and our customers have benefited from low-cost, stable coal production for many years. We see coal being an important part of the future for many years to come. Thank you very much.
We'll take a minute, I think, take some Q&A, but before that, maybe we can go around the room and ask anybody about what some of their top issues are before that. I just want to close a little bit and say a few of the things that were just brought up are important. And I appreciate, Ben, I failed to mention, I work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at the Institute for 21st Century Energy. And what we're involved in is trying to promote energy policies that are common sense for this country. While I talked about the problems with KXL and some of the other issues that we take exception to, we're really out trying to promote the need to talk about the good things that are happening with energy in this country, talk about the positives and the opportunities that exist. And we do promote, you hear this more often amongst a lot of politicians because it is a topic and we're so many days away from election, but we do promote all the above energy policy. And if you do go to our website, you'll see that we promote the need for renewables, the need for energy efficiencies, and they all have a role in our energy vision going forward. But just as importantly, in hearing about what you're talking about, there are opportunities here due to some of the new technologies and advancements in old technologies that are creating tremendous opportunity in this country to get natural gas and to get an oil that we've known has been there for a long time, but we just hadn't figured out how to get to it and get to it cheaply. But also as importantly, that there is availability of cheap powered sources like coal, and that we can't ignore those in this country that provide a tremendous resource and create an important part of our energy mix that we can't ignore. One of the things that Chuck talked about, and we mentioned about this power switching and things, people keep asking when I go around the country about switching from coal to natural gas. And there's so much of this cheap natural gas right now, why don't we just use it and convert these plants to using it all and everything? And it's a great market. Well, as Chuck talked about, it's expensive to convert those, and also you start moving away from another source that has already been a stable supply and is cheap. And at some point you're going to have prices that are going to switch, and if the markets play out and we continue to have this flood of natural gas, hopefully, in addition to the benefits that we're starting to see of more chemical companies actually coming back into this country, and steel companies and some other opportunities are being created because of cheap power or cheap natural gas. We also, though, don't want to start driving the price up so high that for those that have switched, it's going to create a problem. So again, we're trying to promote these common sense energy policies, and we think, in particular, when it comes to some of the fossil energy development, that it doesn't have to be an either-or proposition. Because you're investing in coal and gas technology and oil technology doesn't take away from the opportunity to invest in alternative energies. And as some of the technologies get better, those will continue to drive investment opportunities as battery technologies get better, as solar panels get better, as we can get the infrastructure built. You're talking about pipelines, that's going to continue to be a challenge to get the energy out of places like North Dakota and Montana and from Canada. Despite what's happening in the Marcellus Shale area in Pennsylvania, they're having to still import natural gas because they have problems getting the natural gas that they're developing so quickly out of there. So there's going to be tremendous opportunity in trying to invest in infrastructure, and some real challenges as well. So I appreciate the comments, because I think that they help raise some other issues, and I can do a whole other presentation on that sometime, but or have some smarter people come in and do that as well.
Hey, man, I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
everyone is clear on this. Presently, you could not get the coal plant built in the United States. It's just,
Right.
you just couldn't get it done. And just to give you some numbers, what that means is our Gillette facility, we produce our heat for our MMBTU quantity at less than $1. And you compare that to natural gas, today's price is $2.84 at NYMEX. So our cost is less than 1/3 of what it would cost to switch to natural gas. And so it's a very, very interesting process that's going on. We're going to shut down Neil Simpson. It's a 45-year facility when we shut it down. Usually those facilities last for 60 years. And in fact, the depreciation on that is about 0. So we're not charging the customer anymore for those assets. We're going to have to replace that with another asset and in effect recover that from our customers. So the pressure of EPA is going to have an effect on driving costs. And we're supportive from the standpoint that, yeah, we got to look at other fuel sources, but you know, it's how much, how fast, and who pays for it along the way.
And also, you know, what that means, you know, locally, but also what it means in the long term, I think, for competitiveness in this country. And you're looking at the potential. I know there's some interest in what's happening with LNG facilities, and they're going to be able to export some of this gas. We exported more coal from this country last year than we have in about 40 years. And power generation using coal is diminishing, but that also means as a cost of generation could be going up, and with the potential growth in most parts of the country. That's going to mean a lot to manufacturing, a lot to its competitiveness. You're looking at what's happening in China and India, and the growth and expectation that globally, the expectation is there's going to be a need for about 50% more coal in the next 10 years or so, just to power and generate what a good portion of the world is that doesn't have electricity right now at all, and continue to look at where the manufacturing is growing in some of those other parts of the world and how they're going to need energy and how they compete with that. So it certainly, excuse me, raises a lot of interesting challenges, but also opportunities. And so, and I don't know if you have anything to add, or if you want to come up and go around and do some more.
If I can ask, Tony gave a nice comparison between coal and natural gas. Tony, do you have in your, the tip of your tongue the comparison with solar and wind as well?
Well, wind's quite a bit more expensive. And usually they just compare the generation cost of wind. But the issue with wind is our coal plants are up 98% of the time. Wind at best is about 38% at very best. And in effect, if you just think about yourself being on an operating table, you can't say, well, we're going to stop for a while because the wind isn't blowing. So you have to have your wind 100% backed up. So you still have to invest in the other assets to make sure it's there. So I'm not saying you stop. We've got wind in our portfolio, and we like to continue to do some because you want to understand the technology, you want to understand how to manage it. But it gets back to the issue that I'm saying: do you spend more money now on inefficient technologies, and basically, as a country, take that away from education, or do you invest the money in the education to, in effect, develop the technology that can really better utilize what's going on in the future? We don't have unlimited resources. You try to figure out what the best timing is and how quickly you move the technology.
I agree with Tony. If I could add something too that I've heard, I'm not the expert, these guys are, but you have the generation aspects of wind, and then you have the transmission aspects of it. And the transmission infrastructure from where it's being generated is nowhere near where it would need to be anyway. So you not only have the intermittent generating supply, how are you going to get it to the grid cost effectively to make it work? And then the other point I wanted to make is you have philosophical differences, and people aspire to these philosophical great heights over here, But you can't get those philosophical great heights at the costs that we have today. So at some point, someone's going to either experience some pain, or someone's going to offer some subsidies, or the government's going to have to offset that difference to make it so that the market won't have a riot when you start throwing these higher rates onto people. And that's why I don't think people fully understand that. They think, well, it ought to be, wind is free. You know, it's free, it's blowing. God gave it to us, let's use it. And they're just missing some of those other pieces.
The wind energy tax credits, production tax credits, something that's being debated in Washington, and part of a big holdup between Republicans in the House and Democrats in the Senate, and with the President. And the Chamber, we support it. We support the wind energy production tax credit, but we also believe it has a sunset. We don't know what date that is, but there needs to be a determination that it should end at some time. It's been in place since 1992. It was an effort to try to stimulate that industry, and there's been instances in the past, and most number of different industries that have had those opportunities to get some help, but they do have to end at some point. But it also raises what I continue to say. You know, there's when people think of innovation, and I know this president's very interested in trying to be innovative, and we're moving to a next generation of something. Those same innovations that we would like to look at with alternative energies are those same things that are creating all this opportunity here in this country. Sometimes, despite what's happening with the regulations and you know, industry's finding ways to try to move forward. And you know, just a few years ago, I mentioned earlier, we wouldn't have been talking about oil sands. We wouldn't have been talking about shale oil and shale gas development. We wouldn't have been talking about clean coal technologies. And these are things that are continuing to advance and move forward because there's opportunity there, and because there's markets that are available. And when you look at, you know, interesting bringing up that corridor, more and more there's quotes that are coming out, more and more studies, and more research that's indicating that within North America, somewhere, you know, depending on which think tank you're looking at, is guessing, you know, 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now, we can become energy self-sufficient. Canada and the United States have a tremendous amount of opportunity and development. We have a lot of resources that we're now finding ways to get it cheaply. And also, if you add Mexico into the mix as well, we're looking at some great opportunity. We could become an energy exporter. We could have a great manufacturing base come back in this country again that we haven't seen in a number of years, and we're starting to see some of those industries come back. So we have to lay out a vision. We have to find ways to address infrastructure challenges. We have to find ways to stop putting barriers in place and look at how it all fits into the mix. And you know, certainly technology is going to get better, and things are going to get better. They might not be in my lifetime, but they'll be in my children's lifetime, and we'll see some innovations that'll make things that maybe become obsolete make sense to be obsolete at that point. But right now, we need to have this all the above policy, and not this either or kind of proposition people keep talking about. So I'll stop talking and let you guys raise some questions or have some more discussion. That'd be great.
On your graph, was Wyoming on your graph of 11 states?
No, it's not. We had identified the states initially based on really first looking at Canadian energy, where it's coming into this country. That was our first, and then also some of the states where the top portions of the pipeline. With limited resources, we didn't feel we needed to go and explain how it was going to be beneficial to them in places like Texas and Oklahoma, the southern part of the pipeline. But we also hadn't quite expanded some of the discussion until now, and just recently into talking more about coal and more about natural gas. And we think after the first part of this first part of the Houston project, and when we built it last year, the first 6 months or so, we started hearing more conversation, more need for and interest for more discussion. We started expanding the dialogue, and we're looking to expand. We will be expanding the base and looking for more states to go into. So Wyoming is probably a likely one. Colorado's another one. We have another small project going on at the Chamber that's similar to this. That's right now, we just started in 4 states in Pennsylvania, New York, West Virginia, and Ohio, called Shell Works for Us. And it's just similarly an effort to try to build a network of small businesses utilizing our relationships with chambers and other business organizations to try to build a network there. We're also going to be launching a project called Energy Works for Us, which will be a broader kind of a network, but under the same guise of continue to try to promote this. But I've been doing a lot of travel in those 11 states over the last so many months. So as we get to broaden the conversation and broaden the network, I'm going to be looking for some more help for some people to come and speak and introduce and help lead discussions and try to educate their other businesses in the area about these issues. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit more about Nebraska with this, the whole first iteration of Keystone, and it got shut down because of the aquifer and all of that? Can you just say a few comments about the solution that Nebraska has seemingly endorsed?
Yeah, when the whole permit process, the presidential permit process is kind of unique. It's a executive order that was issued in the late 60s and then reissued during the Bush administration that allows the president to, provides that he has to permit these cross-border energy projects, pipelines, interconnects between electricity. A lot of electricity goes back and forth. And it was just a matter of fact for a long time. And so during after 2009, when the last Enbridge Alberta Clipper pipeline was permitted, the Keystone, the TransCanada already had the Keystone permitted, it became a focus by the environmental community, by the movement. And they were looking for some traction. They were going to a number of different states and trying to find people who would be interested in helping oppose this. And frankly, there's a process in place, and people have an opportunity to learn more about what's coming through the community and have a chance to do public comment period, public hearings and whatnot. Nebraska uniquely didn't have as much of a state process in place. And so there's a lot of pipelines that go through that area. There's a lot of pipelines that go through some of these environmentally sensitive areas that are there already. In fact, when I'm in Nebraska, I often point that out. I have maps of all the different permits or pipelines, and they'll say, yeah, but we don't like this one. Those ones are okay, we just don't like this one. And they carry some of the same fruit that come through. So it's political, but in its mid last year, there was some ranchers and landowners who got together with some environmentalists and felt that they needed to slow the process down a bit and have some grievances there. And we're concerned about some environmentally sensitive areas. There's an aquifer that sits beneath Nebraska that actually touches, I think it's 7 other states. There's a lot of pipelines that run through there or below it. But they also have some areas called the sand hills that are environmentally sensitive for the types of grasses and things that are there. And so they wanted the pipeline to avoid that. So the first thing Nebraska had to do is, after the president had denied the pipeline for what he heard from that state, was create this process. And they had to pass some laws that enabled the state DEQ and some of the other state agencies to start having hearings and go through a process. And that was going along in parallel with TransCanada trying to get their permit back together again. It's kind of interesting. One of the things that would be a hang-up was, here the state had expended money and energy and resources to try to resolve the situation when there was no permit application before the federal government, so it was kind of it could have been a legal challenge for that, but they moved forward. And so they had a number of public hearings. TransCanada went back and looked at what were some solutions and worked with the state very closely to find an alternative route. Back this past summer, they had a number of hearings on what were potential alternative routes, and they've identified one after those hearings and working with the state, and they've put that forward. The state's going to continue to examine it, and basically there's an existing pipeline, the first Keystone pipeline that goes through the eastern part of the state. This starts to shift in that direction, but the points in and out of the state don't move as much. The problem becomes is the most direct line for a pipeline is the cheapest and the lowest risk. And so when you start to have to move pipelines, or you're creating longer routes, and you're also creating potentially more risk. So you have to go back and re-examine what that means. So they tried to move it further east. I don't know how many miles they added to the pipeline route, but they didn't want to get it too far from the existing points that they had already identified in and out of the state, because they didn't want to have to start moving the whole pipeline then in other parts in other states as well, and then just reopen the whole process again. And we'd be able to go back to the investors and saying this project's going to be another few years off. So they've identified this new route, some further east of, and they made some particular interesting little curves to get around some areas that people in the community were very concerned about from environmental sensitivity, and they moved them a little further east and made some little adjustments to it. But hopefully the state will grant the permit. They've been wed together on this now since the spring, and have been working very closely together. So hopefully we'll get that request from the governor, or to the governor, and from the governor to the president as soon as possible. It's been a little bit tedious, but that's just what the state had determined that they needed to do.
I have a question. So if I understand you correctly,
Yeah.
there's other oil pipelines that go close to that same place? Because it's all about the Oglala aquifer, right?
Yes.
And that's what they're so worried about.
Yes. There's all sorts of other pipelines too. They're carrying other natural gas, petrochemicals.
But you said under, is it under that aquifer?
No.
No.
Well, sometimes you can go on, some can go under the aquifer, but it depends on how deep the aquifer is. And typically when you do oil and gas drilling or some pipelines, you can go under, but typically it's over or through, but it's, you know, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of these things running through every state and, you know, frankly carrying a lot of chemicals, natural gas, oil, very, very efficiently, very cheaply, very safely. There are instances, and there's nothing's without risk, but they still, I don't know if anybody's in the trucking industry here or rail industry or barge industry, but it's still the safest and easiest way to transport crude and liquids. So yes, there are miles and miles.
It's interesting.
It's underground.
You don't hear that though.
No. People always envision too that the pipeline, like the Alaska one, that's above ground, and this great big pipeline running through some of the properties below ground. We actually have one of our partners in Montana has a pipeline going through their route, and I have somebody in Nebraska who has it going through the route, and I have a friend whose family has a ranch in Oklahoma who says, hey, that pipeline's going to go through my parents' property. So I kind of find it interesting. I'm finding people all along the way, bang on the pipe, and maybe you can, when they're putting it in, you know, send a message to some of these other folks up along the route somewhere. That's kind of interesting. I didn't know that many people had this pipeline going through the property. So other questions, any other comments?
Are there things that we need to do to prepare for the project, and if so, which communities close to us?
Oh, I don't have a map with the counties on it, but you can jump in. I think, you know, obviously, there's going to be this point in time when Nebraska announces that it's going to, you know, hopefully grant this permit or the request for this project, and then the public debate's going to ensue. Depending on who's in which administration. Governor Romney's indicated he's going to permit it on day one of his presidency. The president's, you know, said he'd permit it or consider making a decision in the first quarter of next year. So along the way, you know, that's the next big point is when the governor puts this request forward, and I think it's going to raise it and elevate the issue in the public conversation again. And I think we have to get out and continue to talk about the benefits. I mean, this is a state that you get the construction benefits. You're going to have tax revenue benefits to your state and local communities. There's going to be power lines that are going to be able to be strung along the pipeline route that are going to bring energy to some parts of the community that haven't had some opportunity to get some of the electricity in there. So there's tremendous benefit and opportunity. And as you go out talking to people in the community, I think share it, but hopefully as we, if there's opportunity for us to ask you to help out, signing again petitions or letters to the president, engaging in that way, talking to your congressional delegations are pretty good on this. One senator has a little bit of a hang up on the Keystone project, but hopefully you can impact that as well. But I think there's generally in this community there's people understand it, and hopefully they'll utilizing some of these resources or what we can provide you, you can help answer some questions to folks or continue to promote it if there's any questions about it. What else would you guys tell people?
You know, I don't have a list of the counties it goes to, but Pennington County stretches out pretty far east. I think the pipeline route actually is just outside of Pennington County, just that little corner where it intersects with a couple other counties. So there's no direct impact, but on principle, on the region benefits. That's why I was in here during the public hearing phase of this thing, is that we believe in it. We think it's a good project for the state. It's going to generate a lot of construction jobs, and then a lot of ongoing revenue for those counties that it does go through, and they are part of our region, and a lot of those do feed into the Black Hills, so we see it as certainly be worthy of our support. Do we have any other questions? Any other comments or burning issues?
Is there anything that we should be doing? I know I have a family and they own trucking businesses from the east part to the west in Nebraska, and we get together and they're just like all flutter about it. And so it's nice to know that you just said that there's other pipelines going through there, because they were under the impression that's the only one. And they were sure it was going to ruin all of the water in Nebraska. I mean, I don't know, is there an outreach that we should do? I mean, are you?
I'm happy to
Knowledge
send you some
chambers?
information or get some information from other organizations that address that specifically. You know, and I wish, you know, I have a few, I'm not a pipeline expert, but I mean, there's other organizations, American Association, AOPL, the pipelines. There's, you know, each state has their own offices that address pipeline information. Department of Transportation deals with pipelines in our crude. They deal with all the other sorts of pipelines. There's plenty of information and a lot of maps out there. In fact, almost overwhelming amount of information. It's just people don't pay attention to it. And then that's, I think, hopefully what we're trying to help do here is educate and bring this information to people and help them get. But
Those pipelines are 40 years old.
yeah, and some of them, and then actually, you know, you look at this one, it's going to be the newest with the best technology and more pumps and more sensors and other things on it that, you know, it's the
You
latest.
could make the argument that this new one is safer than all that whole infrastructure of all those other ones.
Right.
And Linda, we do have a partnership with the American chapter in Nebraska too, and they do have an upcoming meeting, and I can send you some of the information. And
Please do that.
And also, and give you some of the statistics too, though, to help
And I'll make
educate
sure
your
I've got
family.
that.
Well, and I have a couple of different good friends that run different chambers in Nebraska. So
Well,
we do a lot
the
with
Grand Island Chamber is hosting our next meeting, but yeah.
As you can imagine, it's very contentious, even for some of our, even for, you know, the U.S. Chamber, even some of our business organizations there are very, you know, they have members on both sides of the issue. It's a very sensitive issue right there. But we try to come in with some facts. We try to come in and present that, you know, this is something that should be done, and that, and you know, you get the feeling there's a lot of Nebraskans who feel that they've had their opportunity, their grievances have been aired, and they feel that it's the right thing to do and move forward on the project at the end of the day. But, you know, there's still some holdouts, and there's still people who make this very politically charged, and a lot of people outside of Nebraska as well.
Is that the only holding point? Because I kind of thought it was. From what I've been reading, Nebraska is the stop point.
Yes. The governor of Montana made sure at the Democratic convention to make that point, that it was a Republican governor, Republican senator in Nebraska who helped stall the pipeline. So the politics get to be fun.
Do you really believe it'll be approved if Nebraska says okay? I don't.
I don't either.
I have mixed. I really have mixed feelings. I hear a lot of people, Democrats in Washington, and people who say, you know, the president can't continue to turn his back on labor. He can't ignore the jobs benefit. The economy is so in such bad shape. I think he stirred up a hornet's nest on this that he hadn't, you know, really expected to do. There was some steps along the way that the environmental community was angry with the administration on climate, on ozone controls, on a number of other things that they made this their line in the sand. I mean, this their issue that they wanted to dig in on. So
Line in the sand hills.
line in the sand hills. So I'm not. I don't know. I have. It depends on what day I'm who I'm talking to. I have mixed feelings. If he wins next and he goes into the next administration, you're looking at, you know, all those sorts of things. You don't know what the legacy is and what's his legacy going to be, and to whom. Is it jobs and economy? Is it some of these other sorts of, you know, moving towards a different energy future? He's talked about oil and gas and coal being old energy, and we got to have. So I don't know what, you know, what does he want to be his legacy to be? He doesn't have to run again.
Green energy.
Yeah, or potentially, you know, these jobs and economy wrapped around those things from so bad for so long.
Will the Bakken fuel, can they come to a terminal and load into that?
Yeah, that was a big negotiation early on right here. In fact, a lot of the developers in North Dakota really leaned on TransCanada to do that. They just need more ability to get out. So there's some on-ramps and some tank storage areas that have been built right in this area in order to get that out. And then a lot built in here. In the meantime, since this has been built, there's a lot of projects underway, as you've probably heard, to move crude west from Alberta to Western Canada, ship it out to China and other places. There's also a pipeline that Enbridge had that ran this way. They're turning it around to have it bring crude back the other way. Enbridge is also expanding a number of other pipelines that come in this area to bring the crude into the refineries in the Midwest. So there's markets there. There's this crude that needs to come down, so businesses are looking at what their opportunities are. And this has been delayed for so long. 800,000, potentially 800,000 barrels is a lot of oil, and there's pipeline space that needs to be filled, and that's what the pipeline operators sell, is the space in the pipeline. So we're trying to find ways to get that crude down here.
A lot of it's getting moved by rail right now,
Yeah.
over the Ogden Bridge.
Right. And that's an interesting, who is it that I heard somebody just bought up like 3,000 rail cars in order to help try to keep moving some of that crude out of Bakken, and there's just a tremendous lot of oil in it, and they need to get it out. It's discounted right now because of just the surplus there. So it benefits you while it's discounted, but in the long run, once they start getting it out and it starts to flow, the price will probably come up a little bit and then settle back down in the long run. But I can predict oil prices that go up and they go down. That's what I always think. Anything else? We've kept you for a little over an hour. I appreciate everybody coming out and Ben's help and again Chuck and Black Hills for helping out with this event. I hope you found it interesting. We do like to come back we're going to come back again to South Dakota, and hopefully in this area or somewhere else nearby, and in the spring. This is our third, and I'm always glad to have you folks, and we have great conversations, and appreciate all everyone's help in spreading the word and continuing to try to get other businesses educated. It's good to have a good mix of business and industry here as well, and we have folks who are from different industries, whether it's insurance or accounting or energy industry itself. I go to somebody who brought up trucking. I was in where was I recently? Missouri, and someone said, I'm a small bank, but my biggest loan out right now is to a Colorado trucking company that ships pipe more to Bakken and up into Alberta. So that's why I'm here. And it's good to hear people being able to make those connections and understand why not just the Canadian energy is important, but why this development in general is going to be good for the country. So thank you for coming.
Good, thanks for joining me, and thank you, Matt.